The Philosopher's Stone. What is it? Does it wield the power of eternal life? Can it transform base metals into gold? Is it a universal panacea to cure all disease? Or is it a symbol of the evolution of consciousness? In today's episode of Hermetic Journeys, we will explore these questions and hope to provide some answers without sounding too, well, snooty. So let's find out what all this is about.
Hello and welcome to Hermetic Journeys. I'm your host, Tony G. And man, I am on fire today. I even wore my nicest jacket because we're going to talk about probably the most famous emblem from Atalanta Fugiens and also one of the most important. Why? Because we are going to talk about the Philosopher's Stone, the very thing that is at the heart of the alchemical process. All right, so let's get right to this. Let's take a look at the emblem. We see within this emblem a man and a woman inscribed within a small circle. Surrounding that circle is a square. Looks like we have the circle squared here. And then a triangle surrounding that square. And then encompassing everything within the image is a larger circle. There's a gentleman there who seems to be some form of mathematician. He's got some tools at the bottom there, so he can draw this thing out on this very odd brick wall with different sized bricks at the top and the middle and the bottom. It's a very interesting image altogether. Now, let's read the motto and see what's going on here. The motto says, make a circle out of a man and a woman. Out of this, a square. Out of this, a triangle. Make a circle and you will have the Philosopher's Stone. Let's take a look at the epigram and see what Count Michael has to tell us here. Make a circle out of a man and a woman, from which a quadrangular body arises with equal sides. Derive from it a triangle, which is in contact on all sides with a round sphere. Then the stone will have come into existence. If such a great thing is not immediately clear in your mind, then know that you will understand everything if you understand the theory of geometry. Now, before we delve into the depths of this incredible emblem, I think we need to define what a stone is. Because for those of you who don't know, there's of course the Philosopher's Stone that everybody knows about, well, almost everybody, and then there's also a vegetable stone. So there are different types of stones here. So I think what we have to do first is define what a stone is. It seems to have a more generic context, right? And I can't think of anybody more qualified to do that than Steve Kalick, our friend and alchemist. So what I'm going to do is show you an excerpt from the interview that I did with him for Emblem 20, where we discuss the very definition of what a stone is. So check this out. Take it away, Steve.
And I see that you created the rosemary plant stone, right? So can you explain what this is and how it compares to something like the Philosopher's Stone, just so people see there's a distinction between the vegetable stone and the Philosopher's Stone?
Yeah, well, okay. First, let's understand what is meant by it being a stone. Why a stone? You know that an elixir is also a stone, but it's a volatile stone.
Okay.
A plant stone by itself as a stone is a fixed stone. So why did they call it a stone? Is because the idea of making it into a stone is to lock the spiritual aspect of it and the virtuous aspect into a medium, into something that can deliver it. And that would be the salt, the stone.
Right.
So to make a stone, you need its salts, you need its oil, which is its virtue, its consciousness, and we need its spirit, which is what activates it, what gives it life, what gives it animation. So it comes down to the Tria principia, sulfur, salt, and mercury. Now, first of all, your salts have to be very pure, and so does your oil, and so does your mercury, which is the ethanol, the alcohol. Now, we have to understand that in the plant kingdom, alcohol is universal to the plant kingdom as the spirit. The oils are not universal; they are belonging to the entity.
So let me see if I understand. So you would take a plant like rosemary for the rosemary stone. You would go harvest that, or whatever you would do, would get it from someplace, and then you would take it into your laboratory. And what would you do at that point?
I'd steam distill it.
Okay.
Steam distill it. Put it into a big flask. pour water over it, let it sit overnight, and then the following day I would steam distill it. So what happens is by steam distilling it, you're going to extract the oil from the plant. Now, once you've got the oil, now you're going to take the mush, the plant. It's lifeless now. Its soul is gone, because that's what it is. It's the soul. It's the sulfur. So now you calcine it. You go outside and you heat it up and you let the waters and everything evaporate out. You calcine it. It's going to become an ash, a gray ash. Okay. You take the gray ash, you're going to pour it into distilled water, just pour it in there. And the ash is going to go down, it's going to precipitate. So then we siphon off this milky water. It's going to be like a milky water. Okay. Because it's full of salts, good salts. You siphon that off and then you slowly evaporate it and you're going to get a white salt. Okay. But it won't be pure. You're going to do it all over again. You're going to put this pure salt into distilled water again. Well, first you calcine that again. You calcine it again. Now you pour it into distilled water and you evaporate the water again, Teachings say to do it 7 times, but if you do it right, filtering it all the time, that you siphon it off, and really calcining very well, 3 times is enough. I found I can get my salts really pure, white as snow 3 times.
Let me ask you a question, Steve, while you're talking about this purification process. Why is that so important?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that this is energetic medicine. Okay, that's what we're making. It's energetic. Your elixir or your stone can only be as pure as its salts are. If there's any impurities in it, it brings down the energetic level of it. So now you've got the salts and you've got the oil. Okay, so what I normally do, I go buy a big 2-liter brandy. If you do it right, they say 7 distillations. By the time you've done 7 distillations, you'll hit about 95%. All signatures and everything else will have disappeared. So it's pure alcohol. Okay. Yeah. So to recombine these now to make the stone. Okay. This is now the allegory of the Philosopher's Stone. It's still a recombination of the Tria Principia.
Thank you, Steve, for helping us to better understand the concept of a stone in the alchemical process, and also help us learn about how the plant stone is created. Pretty cool. Now, you might be asking yourself, what's in the Philosopher's Stone? What's that about? Okay, what's the recipe? Well, in a little bit, we're going to take a look at this book by Robert Allen Bartlett, who's a practicing alchemist, another great alchemist like my friend Steve. And before Steve, this was my go-to book. But before we do that, now there are a few things I'd like to clarify with you before we continue with this. First of all, Steve uses the words mercury, sulfur, and salt to refer to spirit, soul, and body, okay? But what does that mean? Well, alchemy can be very complicated, obviously, as we all know, because several words can mean one thing, just as several things can be defined by one word, which makes it kind of crazy. It drove me nuts for quite some time, but I finally think I have a handle on it, okay? You have to think of mercury, sulfur, and salt as kind of symbolic placeholders, if you will, for substances that have similar qualities. So if you come away with anything from this, I want you to remember 3 things, all right? Here we go. Number 1, the soul or oil of the plant is also referred to as its sulfur and also represents consciousness in more esoteric terms. Number 2, the spirit or alcohol of the plant is known as its mercury, which also represents the spiritual energy that animates our bodies in esoteric terms as well. And finally, number 3, the salt of the plant is its body, or what is left of its body after purification, which also represents our bodies as well. I'd like to help try to clarify the mercury, sulfur, salt thing, okay? And I'm going to use an example from the 21st century, something that we can all relate to. Now, this will apply not only to the plant stone that Steve was talking about, but also to the Philosopher's Stone, which we will talk about in a little bit. And I'd like to use, as an example, an iPad, right? Basic tablet, iPad, whatever. Right? It's made of aluminum with a glass front and has some electronics on the inside. Well, that would be equivalent to the salt, the matter, or the body, all right, of the item we're talking about. Now, in order for this thing to work, it needs electricity. So electricity would be equivalent to
The alcohol, spirit, or mercury.
once it has electricity going, you still can't use it. It's just turned on, right? But there's nothing loaded on, so it needs a software to bring it to life, essentially, to give it its personality or its consciousness, if you will. And that would represent its soul or its sulfur. So software, soul, and sulfur. I hope this makes sense. I hope it clears up a few things. So let's continue. After watching the interview with Steve, we now know that the stone itself is the fixing of the volatile, or bringing spirit into form, into our world of 3 dimensions, right? But what does the Philosopher's Stone look like? Does it look like a orangey, red, waxy substance that supposedly Nicholas Flamel had created? Or was it the red powder projection that Edward Kelly kept in a pouch and was able to transmute lead into gold, or any common metal into gold, right? Or for that matter, did Isaac Newton create the Philosopher's Stone? He had the recipe for it, all right? And he got it from an American alchemist named George Starkey, or Irenaeus Philalethes. That was his pseudonym.
Here are Isaac Newton's notes concerning the Philosopher's Stone.
So while he was developing the calculus and while he was figuring out gravity, he was trying to create the Philosopher's Stone. Is there any evidence to support that any of this is true? Well, honestly, this is a controversial question amongst alchemists. Some say there's little tangible evidence to support these claims, while some insist it has been done or can be done. As far as I'm aware, none of these people we mentioned provided substantial proof they created the Philosopher's Stone. It's largely based on myth and legend. But as you will soon see, we are going to take a look at a book by Robert Allen Bartlett, a practicing alchemist of today, who gives us a recipe for creating the Philosopher's Stone. We're going to look at one of the processes to create the Philosopher's Stone in Robert Allen Bartlett's book, Real Alchemy. Now, this particular process is known as the dry way through the star regulus of antimony, all right? Now, there's a dry way and a wet way. If you want to find out what those mean, you have to look at videos I did on alchemy years ago, and boy, I wish I had known Steve Cayley back then, but I didn't. But I did the best I could using Bartlett's book. But it'll talk about the dry way, wet way, go through a lot more detail. We're going to skip a lot of steps here because I'm just going to give you an overview as to how this particular method is used to create the Philosopher's Stone, right? Now, the basic ingredients listed here are gold, antimony, and a mercury, of course. And the gold and the mercury represent the masculine and the feminine, respectively. Because, again, we have the philosophical component to this. When the alchemist is working on this, creating the Philosopher's Stone, there's this whole philosophical component, spiritual component that's happening within the alchemist. And that's one of the most important things in creating the Philosopher's Stone, in my humble opinion, from what I've learned. Now, first, the mercury must be purified. Now remember, Steve talked about this in the plant kingdom, where the salt had to be purified, and he went through 3 to 7 iterations of distillations of purifying the salt to make sure it has to be the purest it can be. Because if it's not pure enough, as Steve said, the efficacy of this medicine, of the Philosopher's Stone in this case, is not going to be effective, or it's not going to be as powerful as it should be. Now, this process is done through the application of sea salt and distilled vinegar, right? And there's other things. Again, this is a several-step process, which I'm not going to go into right now. But once that is done, the mercury actually loses some of its secret fire, if you will. And that's what alchemists call the spirit or the soul within everything, all right? It's that secret fire. So we need to reanimate it. The alchemist needs to reanimate the mercury so that it's got its power back again. It's been purified, but it loses some of its oomph, if you will, okay? So antimony is used to reanimate the purified mercury, okay? And Isaac Newton had a recipe for this that he probably got from George Starkey, a.k.a. Irenaeus Philalethes, and that involves iron filings, tartar, and stibnite.
Stibnite is the ore from which antimony is extracted.
Now, once these things are combined, and this, again, is another process. So think of the prep for this. We haven't even gotten to the part where we're going to create the Philosopher's Stone, right? All these things have to be done before, everything has to be prepped properly before the stone can be created. When this is done, this creates what is called the star regulus of antimony, the purified antimonies. Antimony has to be purified as well. That star regulus of antimony is combined with the mercury to reanimate it. Okay. Now, in order for this to happen, another process is involved where silver is necessary to transfer that secret fire from the antimony to the mercury. Right. And this process, alchemically, was known as transferring the secret fire from the doves of Diana to the mercury. Okay, doves of Diana is a code word for silver. So silver is used to transfer that energy from the antimony to the mercury. Now, alchemists had to codify their work because there were people who were nefarious people or puffers who were just trying to make gold, right? But to the alchemists, this is a spiritual thing. This is and the work that they've done, that their work and some discoveries that were made, they wanted to hide it from those who were using it to just for profit and not to help humanity, okay, by creating a universal panacea like the Philosopher's Stone. So you'll see a lot of that. That's why you do a lot of these weird alchemical terms, and that's why in Atalanta Fugiens there's all this imagery, right? It's because all of this stuff is codified, only for the alchemists, for the people in the know, if you will, right? Now, this process alone takes 6 months. Okay, so before you can even begin to work on the Philosopher's Stone, you need this 6-month process to reanimate the mercury. Okay, now once the mercury is reanimated, it needs to be combined with the gold, and it's a gold powder that Robert Allen Bartlett is recommending in this thing, and an amalgam is created by combining them. An amalgam is essentially the combination of two substances, and it's symbolically, of course, like the union of the masculine and the feminine, all right? The complementary polarities we've been talking about so many, many times. So the stone itself is the union of masculine and feminine energies. Pretty cool, right? Okay. Now this amalgam is placed in a heavy-duty flask because it's going to be heated over a long period of time, right? Gradual increase of heat over, are you ready for this? 19 months. 19 months. So you have 6 months to reanimate the mercury, and the processes before that to purify the mercury, and now 19 months to heat it gradually from 112 degrees up to 392 degrees. This is Fahrenheit, right? So think of the patience involved. Think of the resources. Think of the knowledge that we're talking about here. So alchemists are really very special people. Hats off to you, Steve, and to Robert Allen Bartlett as well, okay? Now, during this process, the amalgam, the gold and the mercury, is going to go through a four-phase alchemical process. The black phase, of course, the calcination phase, where the material is blackened through the heat, right? And then something called the peacock phase, where an oily substance appears on the surface of the black calcinated matter that looks very much like peacock feathers. It's kind of beautiful, actually. And then the white phase, where the purification process begins, again, gradually heating. And finally, the red phase, where the stone is actually created. Now, once the stone has been created, right, the flask must be broken to retrieve the stone. Okay, it's been heated for over almost 2 years, right? Now, what's interesting here is that, remember Emblem 8, where there's a man standing with a sword over an egg, right, a heated egg. Well, that's a symbol for what's happening here, right? So when you look at Emblem 8, you go, oh, now I know what's going on here, right? The egg, because the flask is sort of like an egg. It's an embryonic process. It is the philosopher's child, right? And in Emblem 2, we see the Mother Earth feeding the philosopher's child. Well, that's what's happening here too. So you see 2 of these emblems have to do specifically with this process during the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, right? Now, one final thing, right? Now, if the stone is to be used for the transmutation of metals, common metals, into gold, all right, another process is involved, but I'm not going to go into that, so don't worry. But essentially, what's involved there is the stone eventually becomes what I believe to be a powder, okay? And this is what Edward Kelly was talking about, his red powder of projection. So, wow, how about that? So now you get a glimpse into the world of the alchemist and how critically important it is to be extremely knowledgeable, have laboratory experience, extremely careful, right? And to spiritually evolve during this process. So you might be asking yourself, Tony G, for what it's worth, I mean, you're not an alchemist, but you've been studying it for a while. What do you think about the Philosopher's Stone? I choose to believe that the Philosopher's Stone is a metaphor. Now, a metaphor for what? Well, a metaphor for us.
But it is only us in our perfected, enlightened form through the evolution of higher consciousness. It is a symbolic union of Mercury and sulfur, man and woman, the sun and the moon, right? Let's go back to the emblem for clarity. Count Michael teases us in the epigram. You will understand everything if you understand the theory of geometry. Now, I don't think he's talking about a mathematical understanding here. I believe he meant, and this is my spin on it, when you understand what these geometries represent, then you will understand everything. In an excerpt from Steve's work concerning this emblem, and thank you, Steve, the active masculine solar and passive feminine lunar forces of our souls are wed and become one through the alchemical marriage in our work with the inward path. The aspect of our alchemical Mercury as the spirit and essence of life is universal compared to the ego as being individual. The circle contains two archetypes, the man and the woman, right? Protects them as being within the microcosmic circumference as an inner event. This is the inner circle in the depiction, okay? That's what he's talking about. In a nutshell, for me, Emblem 21 reveals the man and women represent the harmonic union of complementary polarities. The circle contains them in the microcosm, while the square represents the four elements which manifest our physical reality: air, fire, earth, and water. Remember the ancient Greeks.
Concerning the squared circle, Steve tells us, this squared circle containing the bride and groom is next contained within a triangle which depicts that through the squaring. That is the introduction of the terrestrial aspect. Essentially, man has realized his triune being. He now fully functions harmoniously with his consciousness, his soul, united with the animating spirit and expressed in matter, the salt. These are the three aspects of his being. The triangle is humanity's triune being, as developed by Paracelsus. Remember him? Kind of an arrogant guy, but very interesting. Kind of a genius, really. And that is the mercury, sulfur, and salt we discussed earlier in the video. The larger circle, containing everything, represents the macrocosm. And we are a reflection of that macrocosm, right? That's why the man and the woman are in the smaller circle, the microcosm to the macrocosm. As above, so below. Quote the Emerald Tablet, right? The alchemical text. Steve further tells us, of course, to me, this all reflects the archetype of wholeness. And this wholeness is further emphasized by the fact that the whole is now further circumscribed by an outer circle. All is one. The Kabbalion states, all is in the all, and the all is in all. As alchemists, we are to achieve the miracle of the one thing, the stone.
Okay. Now, to sum up what we've learned about Emblem 21 and the Philosopher's Stone, let's take one more look at the emblem. We have the small inner circle, which represents the microcosm of complementary polarities. Now, the square surrounding that circle represents the four elements of earthly corporeal existence. Remember, air, fire, earth, and water from the ancient Greeks. The triangle is a symbol of the Tria prima. Mercury, the animating secret fire that gives us the spark of life. Sulfur, our soul. And salt, our physical manifestation in 3 dimensions. And finally, the outer circle is the macrocosm of which we are its reflection. Remember the alchemical adage, as above, so below. You know, there's an expression, nothing evolves in a vacuum. And certainly when you're talking about cultural studies or things like that, things that we're talking about here, we know, certainly through correspondences in alchemy alone, that nothing evolves in a vacuum. Everything is connected. Well, our good friend Maddie's about to talk to us about the Druidic and Celtic cultures and how there are similarities between their cosmology and this emblem. Check this out. It's really cool.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me back again. I have to admit, when I first looked at this emblem, I thought I had nothing to contribute. But when I noticed the circles, I realized this connects to the Celtic cosmology. So, if you know anything about the Celts, you know they loved circles. They left us some megalithic stone circles to prove that. Why would you go through all of that trouble? because everything to them was a cycle. And a cycle isn't exactly just a circle. In traveling that cycle, you come back to the beginning, but hopefully a little wiser, a little more experienced. So it's actually a spiral, another one of their favorite symbols. And that's what we're going to look at today. Because where does this spiral end? Well, you keep spiraling up, raising your consciousness, raising your vibration. So what you see as a philosopher's stone, we see as Awen. What's that? You'll see. But to do that, you have to come with me into the woods and look at this alchemical emblem through druidic eyes. So let's take a look at the innermost circle. The innermost circle, to me, represents the realm of land, Abred. This is the physical plane. This is where people exist, and plants and trees. It is the mundane, the manifested, the things you can experience with all your senses. Interestingly, it is in this circle that we find the image of the man and the woman, the masculine active, the feminine receptive. And yet, it is when they unite, the divine child, that potential, that ultimate, open, infinite potential, the Fool of the Tarot. That's the magic there. If the inner circle is the realm of land, let's take a look at the next circle present here. The biggest one. This is the realm of sky. This is Kagant. This is the realm of the divine, the source, that all unity. And isn't that the purpose of the spiral, of the recipe for the Philosopher's Stone, to return to that reunion, that reunity with the one? So how do we get there? Well, there's something in between. Now, here's where you see the slight differences. Where you see a square, the Druids see another circle. In between the white realm of sky and the black realm of land, we find the red realm of sea. This is Gwynvid. This is that place that is no longer corporeal, and yet there are still some figures there, some archetypal figures. So how do you get from the realm of land to the realm of sea? Well, you cross the ninth wave. You part the veil. You travel to the other world, the other side. The realm of sea is where we find the ancestors, the blessed dead, your spirit guides, the local spirits, and the divinities that we work with, on the regular. One of the characters we meet in here is Caridwen, she of the giant cauldron. Remember her. She is the figure who gave birth to every Halloween witch you've ever seen standing behind the big cauldron. Because in her cauldron, she brewed the elixir of wisdom. Hers is the cauldron of transformation. And how did she learn this elixir? You might be surprised to find out that she went to a bunch of alchemists. The physicians of Mythvi. They're the great herbalists who taught her how to make this elixir. All through her tale, you see her working on this thing. In the end, she winds up with 3 drops. It is these 3 drops that lead another character on a merry chase, but it's the 3 drops of wisdom, the 3 drops of Awen. So we got a little hint at what that is. Now, this in-between realm, Gwynvid, this realm of sea, is also a bridge between the realm of sky, Kagant, the divine, and us down here in the realm of land, Abred. Sometimes we feel that connection really, really strong. Strong, like a spark, or a drop, or a download. That's Awen. That's that touch of Awen. It is symbolized by something rather triangular, which you kind of also see in your emblem. Let's take a look at this triangular section. The symbol for Awen is actually 3 rays: sunrise, sunset, and noon. If you follow more of a lunar path, you can also see these as moonrise, moon set, and the moon at its peak. Above it, you'll see Ceridwen's 3 drops. And what is this? Well, it can be described as chi or prana, that life force, that divine spark in all of us that animates us, that gives us life. That's that spark that lets us know we're just a little piece of the divine. That whole thing about spirit having a physical experience? Well, Awen. It's also divine inspiration. Those moments where you have that brilliant stroke of genius and can't figure out how that inspiration struck, you were just visited by Awen. So if we look at the whole cosmology, and we look at the whole emblem, what we see are 3 realms and 3 rays. If you look at the full symbol for Awen, you will see that it is 3 rays topped by 3 drops, encircled by 3 concentric circles, 3 realms. And what could be better to the Celts who loved 3s than 3 3s? I wish for you that you experience those drops of Awen. Thanks again.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our exploration of the Philosopher's Stone in Emblem 21. I hope it's made sense. I hope it's sparked some interest in your mind concerning this enigmatic subject, right? And I just want to say one thing. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as a Philosopher's Stone or no one's created it. I mean, who knows? Maybe Isaac Newton is still with us and working at MIT or something, right? Maybe Edward Kelly is still, lurking around Britain in cemeteries. I mean, who knows, right? But in any case, seriously though, anything's possible in this incredible universe we live in, right? I'd like to thank my friends Maddie and, of course, Steve Kalick for contributing to this video. I think it's been tremendously helpful, giving us some new perspectives maybe. And I'd like to thank those who have subscribed and those who always watch. Thank you so very much, because I love doing this and I'd love to continue it. And with your support, I will. So, until next time, see you soon.